property management helps dictate the direction that you focus in.
Defining your property manager and defining your asset and what you're going to go after and really making sure that you have a very narrow focus is going to let you know that asset class so well that when something comes up new on the market, you're like, yep, that's the property. What has been some of your most profitable rentals? Well, welcome everybody to the Cashflow Bros. My name's Todd.
I'm Jordan.
My name's Rob.
And we started this series. So Jordan had a great idea. He was like, let's do like, the kind of the basics, grassroots. If I sit down to coffee, we get asked to coffee all the time. And I'm like, I'll take a free coffee. And people are like, the classic pick your brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I hate that term. I'm like, let me just, dive. But all that to say is they want information about how do I get in real estate? What would I buy? All these kinds of things. And then we're like, well, why don't we do a podcast about buying properties, the basics of finance and all that. We started it, and we literally only got through like 1/6
literally
of the outline.
The first bullet point is what we got through.
And we kind of quickly realized it needs to be a series because there is so much to talk about real estate, especially for someone who's never heard some of these terms or how to like do it. So last time we talked about financing. Today, we're going to talk about finding your asset class, the property you want to buy. Why would you buy a duplex over a single family or vice versa? And then we'll talk a little bit about property management and how much, your property management plan affects your potential asset purchase.
Yeah.
So
I think we probably start with the management. I know we kind of put it second on the bullet point, but I feel like it's a good place to start with because it just affects the types of houses you look at once you know the management style that you're looking for.
Yeah. Jordan's wanted to start a management company, so he wants
I'm debating it.
I called one time I was talking to this realtor and he's like, I'm in property management, and he says, every day I just wake up and I look in the mirror and just say, I hate myself. And then I go do my job.
Yeah.
What a way to start your day.
Yeah. Positive affirmations.
Oh, man.
Yeah, what an affirmation.
But all that to say is managing properties is one of the harder parts of the process of owning rentals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that it's one of those things that if you're going to actually do it yourself, which some people elect to do it themselves, and that's fine as long as you know that it's a difficult job. Something's always breaking. I'm renting a house to Rob right now, my old house, and I swear to God, he moves in and everything starts breaking,
It was broken when we got there.
It was broken when we got there. That's what they always
clarify.
Say. Typical renter. It's just, it was broken when we got here.
That was my move-in checklist.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but the thing is I say that because that house is something that I'll probably manage for as long as I have it because the types of tenants that are going to go in there are generally a little bit more attentive to things. They generally take care of things a little bit better. Generally, some don't, but generally they do. And I think that it requires a little less hands-on experience once you get in there, as well as it's a newer house. So a lot of the larger, plumbing, those kind of things are newer.
Yeah.
So that's
Is
a little
this
different.
your first self-managed property?
Well, I tried to manage that one in Auburn when I first started,
That's right.
which was a nightmare. We don't even have to go into that. I don't want. I've already woke up today in the mirror and said I hate myself. Okay, so I don't need to do that.
Yeah, so I think it'll be a good.
We'll try to make this one a better experience.
Yeah. Thanks. So far,
not so.
We'll
good.
leave it better than we found it. I can promise you that.
That's not very hard. That's true.
Yeah, so you moved in a week ago or something, but you were kind of you that was part of the saga that we talked about.
Yeah.
Last week of just one thing after another, and Jordan was part of that problem. But
yeah, luckily that was his stuff to pay for.
Yeah.
When was the last time you were a tenant?
Oh,
was it in Chicago?
Oh no, it wasn't in Chicago. We rented an apartment when we were building a house. The first house me and Amy bought together here in Birmingham.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So property management is super important. We talked about it beforehand, and it is because it could dictate your strategy. So I just had a conversation with a property manager. I was actually doing a deal, trying to get some information about how this Section 8 lease worked and needed some clarity. So I talked to them, and, you know, they're having a lot of issues right now with Section 8, Birmingham Section 8. So there's actually 3 Section 8, entities here in the Birmingham area. So there's Bessemer, there's Birmingham, and then there's Jeffco, correct?
Yeah.
And so all that to say is Birmingham specifically, they are not taking any more on because they're not getting responses from them, delay times on approvals for, you know, increased rent, all these issues. And so for the time being, they're like, we're done dealing with Birmingham Section 8, which is a pretty bold move because this property manager actually kind of bread and butter is Section 8 housing and managing those 4 people. So it's a significant move, but say that you had talked to this company and you said, I really like this company. I like what they do. The pricing's right. But I also want to buy Section 8, and Birmingham is a good part of Birmingham Section 8 housing is a big part of the Section 8 ecosystem here. You've literally just taken out that working with people who have those vouchers.
And they're not the only management company that's doing that right now. So
Correct.
We may need to add this on to our Section 8 video that was so popular because it's kind of the opposite of what was said in that. But not really. I mean,
we said maybe they're getting better.
Yeah, we said maybe they're getting better. But if you start at 0, it's really not that hard to get much better, you know?
But, and maybe, like I said, they've seen it. They've seen that decrease and people just denying them. They're like, oh, we got to do something, and it's still working itself out. But all that to say, if your plan is Section 8, then you need to line up a property manager who's going to accept the Section 8, every Section 8 potentially, because
preferably one who specializes and really wants that to manage that type of property.
Yeah,
correct.
And if that company's saying no to it, that's kind of what they were. They were specializing in it, and they're saying
it's
no more.
Significant.
That's a crazy thing.
So hopefully they'll get it worked out, and all that to say is it's just property management is important. So another dynamic of it, I was thinking is, you know, some specialize maybe in higher end properties, or they have a network of vetting your tenant a certain way that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
There's a gamut of reasons why you would pick a property manager for the way that you want your property to be managed.
Yeah, exactly.
Or decide to do it yourself.
Yeah. And I would say the only time I would decide to manage my own properties if it is something that is A class. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's the only time I'm probably managing my own.
Yeah.
B class and down, probably not going to do it. Even B plus, like, right there on that cusp of I could possibly do this, still probably not going to do it.
And then, A class, you're probably renting to someone who could buy or has owned a house.
Yeah.
Who is used to taking care of houses, knows, when things go wrong, roughly knows what's happening, doesn't have any trouble making a monthly payment and having plenty of reserves.
Yeah.
If the crazy stuff happens, they can still, it's not going to throw them off. Christmas isn't going to throw them off. Back to school is not going to throw them off.
Yeah.
Making their payment.
You're not going to have to chase them down to collect the rent check, which is a big part of property management sometimes. It's like following up. Where's my money? Where's my money?
That's people's whole job.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, Rob, talk me through. So, when I think of property managers, one of the benefits is the repairs process.
Yes.
And oftentimes, I think sometimes we have this idea that because some property managers will upcharge on the repairs, some don't. But in my experience, and I want to hear your experience, what have repair costs come in versus when you've gone out and gotten the quote yourself?
Well, in my experience, the property manager that I use, Signal Properties, they do so much volume of repairs with their vendors, and they really work to get good prices from their vendors on behalf of their clients. So, there's been times where we get a quote and I'm kind of like, it doesn't sound right. And they'll kind of be like, yeah, I don't think that's right either. Let me see if I can get it down. And so, as far as pricing, I feel like, maybe if you really spend a lot of your time digging around, networking, meeting vendors to get quotes, maybe you could do better. But to me, it's pretty good pricing on repairs, and they do charge like a flat percentage markup for coordinating. And I feel like, and I pay it happily because they save me the time of going out, meeting contractors, maintaining a full list, making all the payments, like save me a lot of time. So I'm happy
I think
to do
it's
it.
very fair. And that's been my experience too with, because I have Signal and I have another property manager, Barrington, and their prices actually came in on one of the ones that I had to turn. Their pricing was actually cheaper than I did it.
Yeah.
I probably did a little more quality and I had to do a few extra things that they weren't in the original quote, but they were cheaper. Though the issue and the reason why I did the rehab, and maybe hindsight it still wasn't worth it, was their timeline, unfortunately, was like 2 months out from touching the property.
That's
And
worth
my
something.
previous experience was like, it was probably, when they say 2 months, probably 3 months, because
Yeah.
they get backlogged. But part of the issue is they're trying to keep that pricing so they only have certain vendors they can use.
Yeah.
If they expand outside of that, the pricing would go up, because so they have their preferred people that work for their pricing for their customers, and they just get backlogged.
Yeah.
And so I would agree. Like sometimes we have this idea if we're going to self-manage, we'll find that we'll find the little niche of like, oh, this is exactly this, or cheaper person, or get 5 quotes and all that kind of stuff. But you got to think about the time you are doing to maybe save $1,000
Yeah.
on a total
Is it worth it?
$9,000 turn. It's like, was that?
Yeah.
It's only, only 1/10 more. It's like,
On one of my recent turns, Signal was actually a little bit cheaper than my guys coming out there and doing it. And my guys, were flipping houses pretty cheap.
oh wow,
So he was like, I don't think I can beat that price.
dang.
Which is like, okay, well, then it's not worth it.
So from a repair standpoint, I think the only negative of a property manager that I've seen is timeline.
Yeah.
So sometimes it just takes them a little longer than if you were on top of that project.
Yeah.
So I would not say that's true for Signal. Signal's more on top of it, but their pricing is a little more expensive than Barrington's. But so I think of timeline, and then I think of tenant, finding the tenant, which in my opinion, I have some of my properties are self-managed and some I have property managers with. Don't ask me why. I'm an idiot. It's just the way the cards have fallen. I'm working towards getting everything with a property manager, but finding the tenant is by far, in my opinion, the most time-consuming, annoying thing.
And most important part of the entire puzzle.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the property you buy is most
Yeah.
important.
It helps. They dictate each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's very true.
It's funny because people think it's easy. You just slap it up on Facebook Marketplace, and then boom, you get
people.
You get some
get
hits.
people.
You get some leads.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever tried to sell a lamp on Facebook Marketplace and everybody's like, "I'll take it."
Never show up.
Never hear from them.
Yeah.
Again. And that's what happens with these properties. It's like, "Oh, I want to see it." And then no one falls through.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely ways you can. I'm not going to dive into the pre-vetting process and all that kind of stuff, but to me, that is like one of the biggest values that a property manager brings
Yeah.
is on the front end, finding a quality tenant, having kind of like I was talking with Mark from Signal one time, and he just has this like intuition of like, hey, this actually tenant looks pretty good, but on paper there's a few like negatives. Let me just have a conversation. And they could be a perfectly good tenant. It's just a few things that would need clarity. And other people look great on paper.
And end up not being.
And he's like, there's something wrong here. And he dives into it and
Yeah.
he finds the bad. And
Mark is also, and if you watch this, Mark, shout out to you, is more of the glass is half empty kind of guy, which is helpful on the property management side.
Yeah.
Because, and I mean that in the best way possible, but it helps on the property management side because you see things as the worst that they could be sometimes, and that helps with tenant placement.
Yeah.
That helps with, when you're looking at property and you want somebody that's going to have a tenant put in there,
Right.
you want them to see it first. And
Right.
they see, oh, it's built in 1915. Plumbing's old, everything's old, something's going to happen. This is no good. You don't need to get this.
Yeah. So benefit to, I think we're all fans of property management. Stay in your lane.
Yeah.
But if you are going to self-management, there's tons of resources out there to do it successfully. It's just going to be a very time-consuming process. The
Yeah.
only reason I think you can manage 5 and below personally.
Yeah.
Very successfully.
Nice houses too.
Yeah, nicer houses.
Not
would
5
be
and below
easier.
in bad places.
I think it's hard to do that out of state.
You can.
It's
It's impossible.
But it's very hard. So if you're in state, if you're local, you could manage 5 and below. But the only other thing I think the benefit of that I do like that I have self-managed, and like I said, I'm moving away from that, is I'm kind of a boots on the ground in it. I want to know it so I can teach it, or I can do it, or ask for it to be done the way I want it to be done. And it's allowed me to learn like what's good, what's bad, how do I want it to be done, basically.
Yeah.
Let's move on to hunting.
What kind of property
Yeah.
do you want? The fun part, right?
Yeah.
This one ought to be pretty quick.
Yeah.
So why do people say like that 3-2?
There's not a lot of them.
That is like if you go to all the forums, it's like buy 3-2. Why?
Definitely.
The broadest appeal.
The broadest appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's because the exit strategies are just multiplied, adding that one extra bathroom.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah.
You got a family that can come in there. It's a lot easier.
Yep.
But I feel like Birmingham, when they built this place, whoever built it from the start just said that 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1. But if you can find a 3-2, they're definitely the better option.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 3-2. I mean, I think we've covered areas a good bit on this show, and there's certain areas that are going to be very much street by street, that if you're going to buy in a lower value area, what really matters is the street around it. Is every house piled up with junk cars and abandoned around it? If that's the case, you don't want to own on that street. And then in the higher price ranges, you're just not going to see that. And you can there aren't a lot of bad houses or bad streets.
Yeah, I would say 100, the Birmingham sweet spot, which we say is like really 125, I think now.
Yeah.
To like 250. You're going to find for the most part pretty good houses with that. Now, sub that, there are some places that have some surprising, pride of ownership, a lot of occupants that really take care of their properties, but you have to drive that street and be like, oh wow. Like, and other things too that like I love to find, especially in the downtown areas, streets that have sidewalks, because I think those are the streets that get picked up and renovated, and flips happen first. Yeah. Compared to, we have some streets that are like side streets or just without sidewalks or even a curb. Yeah. There's streets that literally
just go straight into the yard.
They go straight into the yard. And some of the way that the water erodes and stuff just makes it look dumpy.
Yeah.
Makes it look low.
Especially if they're not out there trimming, up to the roadway. And if it's a renter, that's not happening. And
so then that whole street just looks ugh.
Yeah.
And then that falls in. People subconsciously register quality, even if they are not necessarily like living the lifestyle of like, I'm a type A person, this is my standard. They still register like this house is nicer than this house. Yeah. And if you have those intangibles on a nicer street, you're going to rent it easier. You're going to get a better tenant, all those kinds of things. And likewise, the flip is true. So if you have a tenant who's maybe a little sketchy, not doing stuff like illegal stuff, they're looking for a property that's off the beaten path. Yeah. They're looking for one that is kind of run down, because that is, quote unquote, the crowd that they want to roll with. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hate to say it, but.
Well, I mean, it's the broken window theory, right? I mean, you see broken windows or you see grass not taken care of. Generally, it's just not going to end up to be a good purchase in terms of like rented out to somebody, because those same people, it's just a cycle. Yeah. That they just come back constantly.
Yeah, for sure. So 3-2s are great. You can dispo 3-1, especially if it's in a little bit nicer area. I have one of my first houses, which I turned into a rental, is a 3-1, but it's in such a good area, it still has value.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what area it's in.
But I have worked with a company selling some of their rentals that are outside of like kind of their zone. They wanted to kind of compress their area, and they've only bought 3.2s. I've sold several of their properties, and every single one is a 3.2. And I was talking to some of the managers at this fund, and they've been doing some dispoing, and she was like, we've exceeded our expectations on this dispo of like repositioning some stuff from a profit standpoint.
That's crazy.
And I think it's a lot and I would say that when they sold these, 70 to 90% of the properties I sold went to owner occupants. People willing to these places weren't even fixed up.
Yeah.
But there were 3.2s in a pretty decent area, and they sold because owner occupants wanted them.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
So searching for properties, like, okay, you know what you're looking for now, and how do you find it? Are you searching online? What are the top things that you're doing as far as, for your first investment purchase? What do you think the best way to approach the search, the actual?
Well,
give me the candidates.
I think, once you have a serious buy box, because we get contacted all the time with people that just want a good deal. There's no real buy box. I could buy a 42 bed, 22 bath as long as it's a good deal. But it's like that's a little you don't know what you're doing, so it's not going to turn out well. But I think once you truly have your buy box put together, you've got your pre-approval, you know what you're actually looking for, reach out to, a local realtor like ourselves or somebody that you know in the area that understands the areas that you need to be looking in with your buy box. And then I sit on Zillow or Redfin like every night trying to see what's new that's popped on that needs some love. So I do that almost every night, just sitting and looking online.
Yeah. That's a good practice, looking for the type of properties. If your strategy for your first one you think is you want a fixer-upper, I don't necessarily recommend going that way, but you've got to really be on it if that is what you're trying to do.
For sure, because everybody else is looking right now too.
Yeah.
And inventory is at almost zero.
Yeah.
So when we list multifamily, like really anything 2 doors or up, 4 doors, technically multifamily starts at 5 doors. Rob, why is that? It goes bonkers every time we list it, if we get a listing. Why is that in Birmingham?
Because there's really just not that much in existence here. Not that much what has been built for whatever reason, during the time those areas, like the downtown areas, were being built. We just didn't build a whole lot of duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. And a lot of the areas where those properties have kind of fallen into the very low value range. And, have had trouble with crime. And so a lot of what is in existence is not necessarily what you would want to own, especially from out of state.
Yeah. And I would say in the nicer areas or even mid-level, there's not a ton, but like you go to Hoover and there is a lot of apartments or multifamily, if you will, but we're talking about 100+ doors.
Yeah.
Like company, massive Wall Street money, take down type of level.
The mom and pop investors aren't getting
there's
any of
just
that
not,
action.
there's really very few. Now there are a few I was driving through Hoover. There's like these nice little like duplex, this pocket that has like 6 or 7 really nice duplexes. But
Hawkesbury?
Yeah, I think so. But they're like 500.
They are.
Yeah, I can think of like 3 streets that have small multifamily development. In total, less than 30 small multifamilies in all of Hoover that I can think of.
Those are still out there for rent on Hawkesbury. That's right around the corner from my house. Like my house is.
Oh, okay.
This is the house, that duplex that you probably drove past. That's my house.
Right there.
I can see it from my back porch.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, I would agree. And I think because like Birmingham's not landlocked.
Right.
So when development expanded, they just expanded out. That's why you have the Gardendales, why you have the Forestdales, Pinson. Like people don't mind driving into the city or driving in for convenience, and they like the country living a lot.
Yeah.
And that's there's lots of people who are okay with that. And so it's not like, I don't have a ton of history on Boston, but like, or other landlocked, but we're densely populated areas where it's like, well, we just got to go up.
Yeah.
And it's got to, we take these properties that probably originally were a single family home and we're splicing them into 3, and now it's a triplex. And,
Yeah.
from here on forward, it's 3 studio apartments, what was a family home.
Yeah.
That happens some downtown.
It does.
But not nearly like a highly densely populated
And it's not
area.
because it's a requirement. It's just usually somebody that's bought it said, oh,
Yeah.
this is great. We can split this up. Close this door off. Now we're good. Now we got a duplex.
Yep.
So
Yeah. So multifamily, you can find it. I don't know if this would be the best place to have that as your only strategy to invest.
it's going to take a long time
It's going to take a while.
to find, especially if you're not willing to,
Yeah.
unless you're willing to buy in terrible places or you're willing to jump up to great places, that are a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the middle. That's just average Joe run of the mill.
Not a ton.
No,
Yeah.
there's not a lot.
So you kind of have to define your asset class. You got to look for areas. That's where it's a great conversation with us about good areas that we suggest. We have a video about the Birmingham sweet spot, and really that 125. We've seen people be the most successful from 125 to 250, and it doesn't necessarily always, pan out on the 1% rule.
No, it's not. The further up you go.
But that said, one of my easiest rentals that I've ever had is an A-class rental that it doesn't pan out on a spreadsheet, but every time I do a tenant turn, guess how many times I painted that property in the 9 years that I've rented it?
3 times.
0.
Oh,
I've spot painted it because it's in such a nice area. Now, it probably does need a paint job.
yeah, 9 years. God. Oof.
But it's in such a demanding area, they just want the property.
Yeah.
They just need the property.
Yeah.
And so I spot paint it, I clean it up, I put a cleaner through it, and I turn the tenant. I have spent, I think in total on that property in the 9 years with probably 5 or 6 tenants turns, because the turns are quicker. People stay there for like a couple
they're
years
looking for a
school
house
and stuff.
Yeah.
But all that to say is I think I've spent maybe $5,000 on that property in total.
That's
like
nice.
minor repairs. And now I might have some bigger bills coming in the future. But I've spent $9,000-$10,000 on a single turn for a Section 8 housing that they left it just torn up.
That's what people don't understand about that.
Yeah. So there is a happy medium, and that's why we say the sweet spot gets you the best tenant. Is that going to be perfect? Does that mean every tenant's going to be,
No, it's impossible.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, Rob, is what tenant, like I feel like a tenant, honestly, it's hard to make profit on a rental until the tenant's been there for at least 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like those turns will really
They really do.
really mess you up. What has been some of your most profitable rentals?
The ones that appreciate
Mm.
is so. I mean, honestly, your goal when you have loans, which unless you're independently wealthy, you probably need loans to buy a rental property. And if you've got loans, then your tenant's job is to pay that loan. Maybe there's some left over at the end of the day. Hopefully there's a little bit. But in my experience, probably not. Not much, not enough to like live on unless you have a lot of doors. So I would say that, the best tenants, they're the ones that stay. They're going to stay and pay your loan. But while your property appreciates, they're paying down your loan. You're getting tax benefits and everything along the way, building wealth. But I think that's what it really comes down to is appreciation. As much as everyone says, I don't buy for appreciation, you need appreciation to do well on rentals. The tenant's job is to buy you time to wait for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people might disagree with me. You do need cash flow. It's not that you don't need cash flow, don't buy for cash flow. It definitely has to be paying your loan.
Yeah.
But over and above that, you're going to be waiting a long time to find that property that gives you cash flow over and above paying down your loan
Right.
when you account for everything.
Yeah. Or you're finding like, I think you can also get in those positions if you're willing to like
Yeah.
like find a really distressed property and fix it up and then have like, property that's worth 130 to 150, we'll say, but you got 70 into it or 80 into it. But that is an extremely hard, I've done it before.
I'd love to find them.
And it's an extremely hard deal to find. And it's, unless you have a construction company and you have great margins there and you're like flipping like left and right and like you scale, it's very hard to scale that model.
Yeah.
Very hard to scale.
Oh, you're not scaling it to a very large degree.
Yeah.
It's just hard to find them, even if you've got the construction side and you've got all that.
Yeah.
It's hard to find those because that's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
So even if you can find it, somebody else might already scoop it up.
Yeah. So we're saying 125 to 250, 3.2. That is the sweet spot. But outside of that, you can go outside of that, just be educated on what you're compromising. You may go to 250, but say, okay, I'm going to buy 3 ones that are 250. And then you're actually getting a pretty nice house in a decent area.
Definitely.
At 250, that's a 3-1.
And I know we said this in a previous episode, but I think it's relevant to the search for your first property, that a tank of gas is your best investment.
How do we walk past that?
Even if you live here, we always tell it to people who come from out of state. But I think even if you live here and you're looking for a rental property in areas that you may not have been to before, just go drive. Even if you don't have showing set up for specific properties, maybe they're tenant occupied and you can't get into it, just go drive the areas that you're considering,
right,
and really try to get a feel for those areas, those streets. Look at, the types of tenants that you might attract in that type of area. And then you'll kind of it'll give a whole new color to you sitting on Zillow at 3 a.m. in the morning, trying to find properties.
Yeah.
And you can circle sections. You can create custom maps and just say, oh, like I drove this pocket and I really like this pocket. I'm going to track that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's no replacement for time in this business, honestly.
For anything, for any part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a life lesson in general. Is every time I find that people try to find a shortcut, it's typically too good to be true. Like you got to put in the work to be successful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's all I've got.
That's
He's
it.
tapped out.
Yeah.
That's it. Call it. He's already dead.
Calling it. So defining basically your property manager and defining your asset and what you're going to go after, and really making sure that you have a very narrow focus is going to let you know that asset class so well that when something comes up new on the market, you're like, yep, that's the property.
Ready.
I'm already ready. Let's pull the trigger. And you're going to beat out other people who are just like, I'm looking here and I'm looking here and I'm looking here. You're
for the
looking
deal.
right in the middle.
Yeah. Those two go hand in hand. I think that's the main takeaway is property management helps dictate the direction that you focus in.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's helpful.
Hopefully it's helpful to somebody. I hope.
If not,
I woke up early for nothing.
we're deleting this episode is what we're doing.
Yeah.
All right, take it easy, y'all.
See
All
y'all.
right.